God above. Love to thank God above. God above. To thank God above. God above. Love to thank God above. God above.
Gangsters, cops, and politicians, get ready to rock on a mission. Each one of us shares our own vision. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the G's I meet. When I was on the yard, I went real hard. While I patrolled the streets, all the G's I meet. While I got to stay woke.
I like to thank God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above. I like to thank God above. God above.
Greetings. This is your host, Gabe Morales. When you mention the Pacific Northwest, the first thought many people have is lots of trees and rain. It does have those things, but also a multitude of climates and different terrains, including deserts. Unfortunately, this little piece of paradise also has street gangs who have had thousands of victims over the years. You can read about this in my book, Gangster's Paradise. Gangs in the Pacific Northwest, as well as watch other episodes on this channel. It is hard to know exactly how many gangs and gang members are active today in Portland, since many of the tools used to track those numbers in the past have recently been taken away. But according to the 2014 Multnomah County Comprehensive Gang Assessment, in that year, there were 133 gangs in the county where Portland sits, some of which were subsets of larger ones. The study used a common definition that a gang consists of 3 or more individuals who adopt a group identity, which may include a common name, hand signs, style of clothing, gang graffiti to mark their territory, and engage in criminal activity and use violence or intimidation. This was a very similar definition that we came up with when I sat on the Washington State Governor's Gang Study Group, which made recommendations to politicians in Olympia. Like Seattle and Tacoma, Portland experienced a crime wave like never seen before the mid-1980s, with periods of increases and decreases of gang violence. As I described on the Origins of the Bloods and Crips episode on this channel, drugs played a major role in the expansion of the Crips and Bloods in South Central LA and to other U.S. cities during the 1980s, and the Pacific Northwest was no exception. While gangs were present in small numbers, even decades earlier, law enforcement did not finally become aware of the presence of California-style gangs until the mid to late 1980s. According to some Portland original gangsters, the Cali gangs arrived about 1985 to 1986. There were some Double Deuces, Dragons, and Baby Dragon gangs in town previously, but the Crips and Bloods were much more developed and far more violent than early local gangs. According to one source, Face from Rollin' 30s Harlem Crips out of South Central LA, and Scarface from Full Tray Crips in LA, as well as Salt Rock from Rollin' 40s at Southeast San Diego, were some of the first original gangsters to be seen in Portland, and they taught local kids how to gangbang. There were also some Six Deuce East Coast Crips who came up and Rollin' 60s. These were followed by homegrown Portland sets like Columbia Villa Crips and King Boulevard Crips. The Columbia Villa Crips developed in the Portsmouth neighborhood located by the University of Portland. Just after midnight on August 17, 1988, somebody pulled up to a park in the old Columbia Villa housing projects located on the north side of Portland and opened fire. A Crip OG named Joseph Ray Ray Winston was killed, and violence on the streets of Portland grew out of control. Ray Ray was shot by 3 members of Portland's Oregon Piru, or Pop Life. This was a Portland original blood set in the Unthanked and Irvington neighborhoods. 3 members were convicted. 2 of those became Unthanks later, and 1 became a looked-out Piru. It was the city's first documented gang murder, but not its first brush with gangs. A couple months before Winston's death, segments of North and Northeast Portland were informally carved into gang territory by different sets, and word spread fast on the streets, even down in LA, that Portland was easy pickings for drug trafficking. The city saw more than 280 gang-related crimes and at least 20 gunshot wounds as violence skyrocketed. People were telling us from about 1987 on, we've got a gang problem, said Tom Peavy, who patrolled Portland's North Precinct at the time. Kirby Block is a homegrown set named after Kirby Avenue that formed in the late 1980s through early 1990s. I've been told that 07 was the original KB set in Portland. They went from nothing to about 7 deep at first, and they have territory that runs from roughly North Shaver in the south to North Ainsworth in the north, I-5 being on the west, and Northeast Martin Luther King Boulevard on the east. Some people state that Shaver is the southern border of the original area, but my sources say it is actually Skidmore in their south territory. Kirby Avenue is located by Unthank Park. The KBC versus Unthank Park beef is how Unthank turned Bloods in the 1990s, so they were going at it hard also. Unthank Park was originally named Kirby Park, but renamed after Dr. Unthank in the 1990s. He was the first Black doctor at nearby Emmanuel Hospital. The Unthanks have original ties to the Denver Lane Bloods in LA and have always beefed with the Kirbys just to their north. They claim north side and are the only blood sets on that side of the original neighborhoods. Kirby Avenue is east side, as in east of the I-5 freeway. The Kirbys claim 4700 block. This is Blandana Street and Kirby Avenue inside their territory, while Columbia Via Crips is 3700 block, Willis Street and Chase Avenue in the old Villa Projects area. Together, they are the Seven Family, or Seven Ways, showing the original alliance between these two Portland original Crip sets. A couple of guys that the Portland G's still pay homage to today was Anthony Branch Sr., known out in the streets as Cheese. He came from a large extended family that for years had been plagued by drugs and crime. Of course, not all family members were involved in crime, but some were. Anthony Branch Sr. was the father of Anthony Little Smurf Branch, who was only 11 when Portland had its first documented drive-by shooting and murder of Ray Winston, as previously described, back in 1988. 1 year later, Little Smurf became a gangster. He joined the Kirby Blocks, in part because his older cousin, Jonathan, was a Kirby. By the age of 12, Little Smurf was in his first gang-related fight. At 14, he was accused of being involved in a shooting. By 16, he had been in front of juvenile court at least 10 times. Soon, the police documented that they had stopped him 44 times, even though he was locked up off the street, at times as a juvenile, and 2 years spent in adult prison. Due to his criminal activity, Little Smurf created a lot of enemies, and many attempts were made on his life. So he often wore a bulletproof vest while out in public. Sometime in late 1994 or early 1995, Little Smurf made a drug run to Richmond, California, which is an industrial port city in the San Francisco Bay Area. Little Smurf got his drugs, but burned his connection. Police believe the ripoff was for as much as $50,000 worth of cocaine. Little Smurf was arrested a few months later in possession of 22 grams of cocaine, and he was eventually sentenced to 29 months in prison. Some Richmond, California gangsters came up to Portland in the 1990s, and they went at the Kirby Blocks hard. By 1995, there was a hit out on Little Smurf by the Richmond, California gangsters, who saw him as a threat to the drug dealing business and for burning them. On February 19, 1995, Little Smurf and his cousin Norman and a friend, Harry Villa, were driving around Northeast Portland when they stopped in their vehicle. Within minutes, several men confronted them on foot and opened fire, with about 12.5 rounds hitting the vehicle. Villa was hit in the back before the car sped away. Villa was also from Kirby Block Crips and killed in prison. He was beaten to death with a baseball bat. Several other shootings followed, resulting in injury or death to associates of Little Smurf. Even his own father, Cheese, was killed when he wouldn't give up his son's whereabouts. Soon after his father was killed, the Richmond's gangsters' gunfire stopped out on the streets, just about the same time that Little Smurf began serving his 29-month prison sentence. He was moved to a California facility to serve out his time. Little Smurf was released from prison on August 22nd. When Little Smurf was released from prison, He was immediately booked in the Multnomah County Jail to face new charges of racketeering. He was bailed out, but jail might have been a much more safer place for him. Little Smurf had exactly 26 days of freedom before his violent past caught up with him. It was fall when, in front of a number of witnesses, he got into an argument about drugs with a man at the Viewpoint, a Northeast Portland strip club. The man pulled out a gun and shot him at point-blank range. Little Smurf was dead at only the age of 20 years old. Back in 2009, law enforcement officials in Portland, Oregon, toppled a Northwest drug kingpin who had ties to Kirby Block Crips and had his own subset that was called the Mob. James Ray Lonnie Yoakum, who ran a major cocaine trafficking ring and used his Portland barbecue restaurant as a front to launder money. Police arrested 19 people in the case and seized pounds of cocaine and more than $100,000 in cash during their 10-month investigation. Agents used wiretaps and round-the-clock surveillance to keep tabs on the operation that investigators believe put $300,000 worth of cocaine out on the streets of Portland every month. Wiretaps on Yoakum's cell phone to one of his sons, Linnell George, helped break the case. Linnell was filling block deadly rivals of Kirby Block Crips. This caused lots of internal issues and was part of the war between Kirby Block Crips and Failing. A second son, Jericho Yoakum, was arrested in Portland and sought on a California warrant accusing him of robbing medical marijuana clinics in Los Angeles. On his personal MySpace page, Jericho listed his general interests as money and his heroes as being Bill Gates and my dad. As stated, Kirby Block and Rolling 60s usually get along. The Rolling 60s were very active in Portland during 2010, so much so that a major sweep was done on them in 2011, as being the most violent gang in Portland at that time, according to police. A rivalry between Failing Street and Kirby Block was sparked by the March 27, 2013 shooting of an 18-year-old. Edward Jewel Payton, aka EJ, was shot by Linnell DeMarcus George. Patton was shot in the head and abdomen at a gas station near Northeast 60th Avenue and Killingsworth Street. George was a member of the Failing Street gang, while Patton was the son of the founder of the Kirby Block Crips. The shooting was responsible for dozens of tit-for-tat shootings between the two gangs in subsequent years. In 2015, there were several homicides, including Marcus Cheney in March, Stephen Dwayne McCorvey Jr. in September, and Lorraine Seamster in November of that year. Everything on the street told police that they were killed by Kirby's. On January 21st, 2018, a local lawyer driving to dinner called 911 to report hearing gunshots near Stark, located downtown. Police found Alante D. Williams unresponsive and prone in his SUV, which was parked and still running at Southwest 4th and Stark. Multiple bullet holes riddled the driver's side window and door. Police broke out the driver's window and found Williams shot multiple times in the neck, back, and left foot. He was taken by ambulance to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Williams had been seated in his car at that spot because he believed he was about to meet a woman who he had connected with on Facebook. But the setup was actually orchestrated by Burton Collins, who made up a fictitious woman to entrap Williams when they walked up to his SUV and shot him. The day after the shooting, Portland detectives recovered Bert's discarded GPS monitor from a trash can, and a security guard in the area of the shooting identified Bert and Collins as standing by Williams' SUV after she heard gunfire. Video surveillance images also showed them fleeing the scene. Officers identified Bert and two Nasty Collins as associated with Failing Street, while Williams, aka Little Face, was a Kirby Block Crip, a rapper who had close ties to the Rolling 60 Crips. Bert and Collins' attorneys challenged the gang identification in court, but police insist that Bert and Collins were both Failing Block. Collins went by the moniker of Too Nasty, who operated under Failing's OG, Linnell DeMarcus George. Violence committed on the streets of Portland was often described in rap lyrics. Kirby gangster crip Jonathan Demetrius Norman, also known as Smurf Luciano, was a gangster rapper from Portland and a record owner. Little Smurf was named after him. He got shot earlier by a Compton Campanella Park Pyro back in the day, and he produced Gangsters on the Move, as well as a CD called Guilty to Proven Innocent, which has an array of gangster rappers, including Mr. Dog from Tacoma, who I interviewed several times at the King County Jail. In Portland, the Hoovers breaking off was in part due to their falling out with the Rolling 60s and Kirby's, as they were always fighting over drug territory in Portland. While Ronald Spiderlock Hamilton is noted as being a co-founder of the Hoover Crips in Oregon and was featured on the television show Gangland, he lost a lot of respect from Hoovers for talking too much. Portland OG 107 Hoovers, the CeeLos, came up from LA, while most of Portland's 74 Hoovers are known as the Bays, who originated from LA, moved up to Seattle, and then back down to Portland, as did some Five Deuce Hoovers. That I can verify via numerous interviews. Herman Big Herm Handsome, deceased, is said to be the first 107 Hoover in Portland who came up from LA. He put on Johnny Ray Brown Sr., a.k.a. Big Booyah, and his cousin Roy Roan, called Big Yaboo. There is a whole lineage of Booyahs and Yaboos from 107 Hoovers in Portland. Allegedly, Big Booyah told the Hoovers that they were Hoover criminals, not Hoover Crips anymore. This is following along the LA lines of how Hoovers now operate. This allegedly occurred back in 1998. But I've seen some Hoovers still claim Crips, especially in Seattle. Jermaine Gamis Brown and Ronald Fly Rhodes were nephews of these guys and put on by the big homies. They are Portland Hoovers, not LA Hoovers. The Hoove Think Alliance was originally formed in the Oregon Youth Authority around 2007 to 2008. The Unthink Park Hustlers and Hoover members were getting into lots of fights repeatedly. Kirby Block Crips and Rolling 60s while they were in custody at McLaren, and they agreed to stand together. New Year's Eve 2008 into 2009, Unthink Park member Darius Perry, aka Little Boobies, and Vermont Grooveface Lawrence from 74 Hoover got into a shootout on the Portland-Gresham border with Kirby's, Billy Butler, and a 6 Deuce East Coast Crip named Gary Smith. Butler shot and killed Perry. Then Lawrence picked up Perry's gun and chased down Butler, killing him. This solidified the Who Thank Alliance. There was even a Who Thank rap music collaboration called Yeah That. And in 2011, investigators covered a Who Thank hit list written by Hoovers and Unthank Park Hustlers Bloods on Rolling 60s and Kirby Block Crips. In early 2011, one of the Kirby Blocks on the hit list was killed, and his father was considered one of the founders of the gang. As I mentioned previously, in August of 2011, the 60s and the Kirbys held some meetings to discuss increasing drug sales and strategies to fight off the Unthanks and Hoovers. The Hoovers remain very active in Portland today, as they are in other parts of the I-5 corridor. In particular, the 74 and 107 Hoovers are very strong in Portland. Hoovers may wear more orange than blue, as well as use a 5-point star and H from Houston Astros gear or San Francisco Giants gear for the SF to represent members of the 7-4 set. The 7-4 Hoovers in Seattle grew by leaps and bounds in the 1990s under George Peanut Hendricks, who traveled down to LA, as seen in this picture with other Hoovers, as well as to Portland, where the 7-4 and 107 Hoovers were strong. And they often went to each other's events. Guys like Corey Jenkins, aka OJCJ Groove, joined the Hoovers in Portland at only 10 years old and has appeared on Gangland also. Then there was Corey Little Booyah Hudson, who got his moniker from his uncle, Big Booyah, and Leonard King Lavish Brightman, both shot callers that I dealt with personally at the King County Jail in Seattle. They were both arrested at the funeral of fellow Hoover Devontae Kearney, who was killed in early 2018 near North Park in Portland. In 2019, federal prosecutors announced indictments against Hoover gang members allegedly responsible for 3 Portland murders. Those indicted as part of an ongoing alleged conspiracy include 7-4 Hoovers Lorenzo Lowdown Jones, who is facing the death penalty in the RICO case. He is alleged to have done some shootings with Inglewood family gangster bloods, according to the streets. Ronald Fly Jones is also facing life in the RICO case. A total of 36 individuals were charged with varying federal crimes under the Hoover racketeering case. Jones and Rhodes were the only defendants left at this time on the violent crime, aiding racketeering, or VICAR cases that have not made deals. Several other defendants pled out on other murders. Some Portland Inglewood family bloods are LA transplant sets that came to Portland in the late 1980s to early 90s. In LA, Inglewood family claimed 9 Deuce. In Portland, they claimed Deuce Full, based on the original territory of Northeast 24th Avenue between Northeast Alberta and Northeast Killingsworth. The Portland 107 Hoovers and Inglewood family gangster bloods were involved in the October 21st, 2018 homicide at the New World VIP Lounge in Lakewood, Washington. The victim, described as being a blood affiliate, was waiting to pick up his girlfriend who worked at the club. About 20 shots were fired outside the club by multiple people. 3 people were found at the scene with gunshot wounds. 10 days later, an FBI violent crime task force arrested Monroe James Money Rat Ezell, who I also personally dealt with at the King County Jail. The RICO case on the Hoovers for being involved in drugs and violent crimes is scheduled to start in August 2022. I know so far I talked mostly about Crips and Hoovers, but there are many Bloods also in Portland. Woodland Park Bloods started as a local set and closely aligned with loped-out Piru gangsters who also made an impact on the Rose City. Besides the Unthanks, they are the only Portland original Blood sets. Just as in Seattle, most Bloods and Pirus in Oregon were homegrown gangsters. Shootings in Portland in 2020 more than doubled over 2014 rates. There were over 50 homicides, many of them gang-related. I know COVID has been blamed for a lot of craziness with people. Many people point to the main cause of the problem being the Portland City Council defunding the police of millions of dollars in 2020, as well as disbanding the gun violence reduction team. There have been 159 murders since the gang violence reduction team was cut, and there's been a huge increase in crime, including homicides. Another factor, similar to Seattle police when the city council did the same thing, is veteran officers have retired en masse because they do not feel supported by the politicians and by some citizens. In 2020, the Portland City Council cut a total of $30 million from the police budget. That was over 10% of the entire annual budget. In November 2021, police identified a self-identified blood member, 32-year-old David Sanders, as being shot and killed. It was the city's 77th homicide of that year, and the trend does not seem to be decreasing. It is getting worse. Reasons for this are many, but obviously lack of trust exists on all sides. The Portland Police Department's gang enforcement team was accused of racial profiling based on traffic stops, with 59% of stops being citizens of African American descent, while Blacks only make up about 6% of the city's population. It was also found that some minority youth were on the gang list and didn't even know it, thus had no way to appeal the gang designation. Critics counter that a large number of Black and Hispanic youth are involved in gang crimes compared to other ethnic groups. While 59% of the stops were Black motorists, 62% of shooting victims were Black. This is a sad reality that should not be blamed on the police, but is rather due to a wide variety of factors that I do not have time to go into now. Perhaps I will have an expert panel cover that subject, as I did in the Future of Policing that can be found on this channel. Some people have stated that the police union has resisted the use of body cameras. Portland was the last major city in the U.S. not to implement them. But some cops I know have stated that this is a false claim, and they actually have been advocating for the use of body cameras since at least 2012. The city council has resisted funding this, saying that it will be a way for the police to just surveil community members and harass them further, and that officers should not be allowed to review camera footage before writing reports about their actions. Like other places in the Northwest, Portland politicians often tie the hands of the good cops who are working hard to increase public safety. Yes, I personally know a few cops who abuse the authority of their badge, and that includes Portland PD. But I believe most will eventually get caught. Portland PD is now down a couple hundred officers from just 10 years ago, with many more thinking about retiring or quitting due to lack of support. And the shortage of officers over the last decade does not even take into account Portland's huge population growth. In addition, besides short staffing and loss of police funds and support, there are also some major issues with the DA's office not keeping people in custody who have been caught with guns or dope or have done shootings, as well as there are less violations by corrections in recent years, likely due to political pressure. Clearly, a lot more must be done as far as gang prevention, intervention, and yes, I dare say, sometimes we need police suppression to get the hardest knuckleheads off the street, as they are a public safety danger and often even a danger to themselves. But the end goal here should be to stop gang violence using whatever tools are most effective and appropriate. I know I left out a lot. Perhaps I'll come back and revisit gangs in the Rose City at a later date. But please keep those likes, subscribes, and comments coming. Please let me know what future episodes you'd like to see on different topics concerning interesting and controversial subjects in the gang and crime world, police and corrections field, and political and social change arena. Thank you for watching and supporting this channel. I really appreciate it. This is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.
God above. God above. Like to thank God above. God above.